حي على الفلاح. The Prophet ﷺ never met his father. His father passed away before he was even born. His mother passed away when the Prophet ﷺ was only 6 years old. Then the Prophet ﷺ is cared by his grandfather. And then 2 years later, at the age of 8, the Prophet ﷺ loses his grandfather. He has no biological siblings. There's no older brother, older sister. Father is gone, mother is gone, grandfather is gone. The Prophet ﷺ is raised by his uncle. That the way Abu Talib looked after and cared for the Prophet ﷺ was remarkable. The Prophet ﷺ, from that point on forward, as he's growing up, it seems like now things are getting better. He grows into this remarkable young man, so talented, so extraordinary, that people are astounded by the quality of this young man. That inevitably leads him to getting married. And marrying someone of such remarkable character and quality that she was admired by people at her time. Khadijatul Kubra radiyallahu ta'ala anha. And now he's married and he's starting a family of his own. But tragedy was yet to strike once again. The Prophet ﷺ, in his life of 63 years, he was blessed 7 children. 6 out of those 7 children died in his lifetime. It is unimaginable of having to bury your own child as the single greatest tragedy that any human being can ever experience. It is talked about in some cultures as the most painful experience that any human being experiences in this world is a parent losing a child. And so the Prophet ﷺ suffered through the heartache, the tragedy, the pain, the difficulty of losing not just one, but losing 6 children in his lifetime. Think of the heartache. The Prophet ﷺ, even before the hijrah, even before his mission would come to fruition, even before they would see the manifestation of the promise in the community, Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha passes away. Abu Talib. That's such a heartbreaking moment. That the man who raised him, the man who was like a father to him, the man who cared for him, the man who supported him and defended him and tolerated all kinds of difficulty and adversity for the Prophet ﷺ, did not accept his message before he left. And the Prophet ﷺ was so grief-stricken, so saddened at that thought that Allah had to personally console him. You cannot guide those whom you have loved, O beloved, but Allah guides whomsoever He has willed. This was not in your hands. And the Sahaba remembered the pain of the Prophet ﷺ from that day. Seeing his face and the grief on his face, the pain on his face, when he walked out of Abu Talib's home, that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, a decade later, when Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu's father, Abu Quhafa, is accepting Islam, Abu Bakr becomes emotional. The Prophet says, are these tears of joy? And he goes, no, tears of sadness. He says, why would you be sad? Your father. And he's described, he's blind and all of his hair is white. Even his eyebrows and his eyelashes, everything is white. He's so elderly. that your father is becoming Muslim at this senior age. Why would you be sad? And Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, because I can't stop imagining how in a heartbeat, in the blink of an eye, I would accept the trade of Abu Talib's hand being in your hand instead of my father's. Because I remember the pain that you felt, that I could read on your face on that day when your uncle passed away, when your uncle died, without accepting Islam. The Prophet ﷺ lived through the tragedy of the loss of Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib, who was his father's younger brother. But he was only 2 years older than him. And they were nursed by the same woman. So they grew up like brothers. But the closest thing that he had to a sibling was Hamza. The big brother that's always got your back, the big brother who looks after you. That's who Hamza was to the Prophet ﷺ. And that's why the day Hamza accepted Islam, he accepted Islam because somebody dared to mess with the Prophet ﷺ. And Hamza went over there and he quite literally cracked the skull. And then he's like, no, nobody messes with my little brother. That's why when Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu became Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ being so pleased and so happy and just feeling such a sense of like satisfaction was for that reason, that the closest thing that I have to an immediate family member is Hamza. And he is now with me today. And the Prophet ﷺ had to stand in the battlefield of Uhud and stand there and look at the body of Hamza radiallahu ta'ala. Not only is he looking at this big brother of his, somebody who he loves so much with all of his heart. Not only is he looking at his dead body, but then he's looking at his dead body while his nose and his tongue and his ears have been chopped off. And the Sahaba say that this groan came in from inside of the Prophet ﷺ. And it's almost like it was such a shocking image. It was so painful, so jarring for the Prophet ﷺ that it looked like he had been hit, like he had been struck, like he physically stumbled. Why would somebody do this? How could you do this? That the Prophet ﷺ was so grief-stricken that after everything was said and done, and they had buried Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu along with all the other shuhada of Uhud, and he got back to Medina, that the Prophet ﷺ started to cry again. Say, Ya Rasulullah, what's wrong? And he said that because today there's someone mourning everyone who has died, but nobody mourns Hamza. Nobody mourns Hamza, my Hamza, because I'm the only one that cared about him. Our own people did this to him. The tragedy that the Prophet